All right. Hello, everybody. I'm assuming you can hear me and see me. My internet connection is reportedly excellent, so, clearly there were no problems. This is totally
Oh
exactly
no.
what we meant to do at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, this has been a fantastic use of our 20 minutes. Yay!
oh, yay. It's not like I'm on a tight schedule today or nothing.
No.
So, for those of you watching along and playing the home game, we are back at long last with Back to Basics. If you haven't been attending our worships or getting our emails or participating in the Discord server or seeing the Skywriter I hired last week, we have changed up our schedule for Back to Basics. Um,
You
largely,
popped me with that one. Good.
yeah, I do my best. But no, we've changed our schedule for Back to Basics. So now um, we're just doing live streaming for a while because that's about all we have time for because it takes me a lot less time to edit a 15-second intro video and then do a live stream than it does to edit an entire damn episode. So until we have more time, then I think we're going to be.
Or until one of you that finds that sort of work child's play and you could do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if that exists, but if you enjoy and would like to help out with video editing, we could really use a video editor.
Oh, Lord, is that correct? In the excuse me, in the meantime, we are going to be doing the thing via live stream for a while. So the way the schedule works out now is pretty simple. We're doing 2 live streams a month. We're going to be doing the first week of the month where we are going to be visiting our dear friend J-Man over there in the Gospels. Um, see, I had to do the millennial shout out right there. It was necessary, I promise. But we're also going to be continuing our trek through Exodus, but we'll be doing that as a live stream on the third week of the month. And on the other weeks of the month, if you are feeling just lonely for some biblical content, come join us in the Discord server for the actual Bible study, where we all get together as a group and talk about, the Bible and shit. So it's a good time to be had by
Where we're
all.
currently working through
The
Job,
book of
correct?
the book of Job. Yes, we are
Yes.
as of this broadcast, we are jobbing it up pretty big. Um, and it's it's very interesting. There's surprisingly little amount to debunk, but also surprisingly a lot of evangelical programming to debunk that goes along with it. The book itself is wonderful, and we have a great time talking about it. So if you want to join us for that, that'll be wild. Now, today, on the other hand, we have for ourselves a continuation of the book of Mark. Presuming I have done my job well, which God knows that is never a guarantee, we should be seeing the scripture on the screen. And I'm going to kind of adjust some things so that I can see it better and hope I don't screw up the broadcast while I do, which I did not. Fantastic. So we have our scripture on the screen. We are going to be working through the 5th chapter of Mark's Gospel, which is effectively divided into 2 parts. At the front end, we've got the story of a young man by the name of Legion and his encounter with somebody who just turned him into a pig. Totally innocent guy. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Demon Legion, pigs, all that fun stuff. And then on the second half, we have the first of what's called a Markan sandwich, and I'll explain that more a little bit later. Shall we get started?
Sure.
Yay. Oh, I'm getting a
Sorry, I was
war.
very geared up for this, but the 20 minutes away. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's go.
yeah, that's a thing. I am getting a
All right, so do
warning
you want me to
alert
read?
here.
Because I've got.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Um,
Pardon my voice. I've been sick off and on for like a month.
all right. Take it away, Courtney.
Jesus heals a man possessed by demons. They came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes.
That
Is
sounds
that
about
it?
right.
Gerasenes? Gerasenes?
Garrison seems fine.
And and when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any more, even with a chain, For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Pronoun game. He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Okay. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, stampeded down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Bad day for that swineherd. Well, the swineherds ran off and told it in the city and the country. Then people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the man possessed by demons sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, and they became frightened. Those who had seen what had happened to the man possessed by demons and to the swine reported it. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. So that's a good breaking point then at the end of
Yeah.
that particular story. So is this like the great break in Mark anyway, the great breaking of like um the holy mystery, or the what do they call that? The fact that Jesus wanted them to keep it a secret that he was the Son of God.
No, this is not where that breaks yet. That will come much,
No?
much, much, much later.
Because he's
Um,
telling somebody, "Go tell people how awesome I am," and that it doesn't seem like something that he's been doing so far. Correct me if
yeah,
I'm wrong. Like, this is different. I'm kind of
it's worth
surprised.
noting, and I'll bring this up, that we read identity into lines that don't actually have identity in them because we know Jesus is Lord. But when he says, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you," people would not have immediately said Jesus is Lord, so we're going to tell them all about what Jesus has done for you. He's
It's
suggesting to the,
it's what go say what God has done for you.
exactly.
Okay.
It's a bit of divine
Yeah.
deflection because he's actually saying, "Hey, look at all this cool thing. That was God that did that, not me, not me." Pay no attention to the man in front of the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's more that. And this is actually, believe it or not, a more common problem than you would think, because we often do like mistake Jesus referring to God as Jesus referring to himself. That's actually been an occasional issue of biblical translations as well. Um, so I'm getting my
Well, nature of
commentary
the
loaded
Trinity
up here.
makes that easy to kind of mess around with back and forth, you know?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah.
But
So
you okay over there?
no, yeah. I'm loading up my commentary here
Ah,
uh, to make sure that I'm ready for this
tech
one
is
because
failing you today, my friend. Seriously.
what's that?
Said the tech is failing you today.
It's been fighting me today, but we got it working. So I got my commentary in front of me, which I was just stupid enough to not load up in advance. Um, so with the beginning here, we've got the first real encounter of Jesus with a demon. So I was gonna go ahead and ask off the bat, did you have anything about that? Because I was
Yeah, no,
surprised that that wasn't your first jump to.
um well, I tend to finish with the most recent thought that I had, but yeah, obviously, I feel like the big question here is like,
Mm-hmm.
A demon? Demons? Really? Like, let's go over this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is happening here?
The simple answer to that is I don't know. And nobody does. Not really. Like I've talked about this before as we've kind of worked our way through Genesis and Exodus a little bit. So avid viewers of the stream will recognize this. The simple fact that we
Friends
don't
of the
know,
pod.
yeah, friends of the show will know that we don't know what the fuck a demon actually is. Like, there are plenty of times within the biblical canon where something or someone is referred to a demon, where modernly we've reached a point where we're like, yeah, that's just some kind of severe mental illness. That's just somebody who is just not having a good day. That's somebody with
But the
schizophrenia.
thing
That's
with the swine and the emphasis on a lot of people said this and everybody talked about it because there were a ton of witnesses
yes.
seems pretty solid.
And that brings us to the second half of the discussion of spirits and demons and angels and all that stuff, where I brought up before. There's a whole metaphysical side to reality that's pretty much since the scientific awakening and the Enlightenment we've kind of dismissed, but is still very much there. We haven't really explored it scientifically. We haven't spent any time on it. We kind of dismissed it as superstition. But we've all encountered things along that lines. We all generally believe, and in some respects know, that consciousness and our kind of larger essence is more than mere matter. But we've spent the last what five,
I
six
hear
hundred
you
years.
trying not to quote Yoda.
Say that again. You cut out.
I said, I hear you trying not to quote Yoda.
I'm
Luminous
not gonna.
beings be, not this crude matter. It's one of
You
the
know,
best lines in Star Wars. It's fine. Rip it off, man.
no, 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 and it harkens back to just how much of Jedi philosophy is taken from Jesuit philosophy. But I digress. Um, no, like that is like a fundamental truth there, and in as much as luminous beings are we, to Yoda-ize it, if you will, that means there are other things out there too that we haven't bothered to explore or document or really look into with any kind of weathered eye. We've pretty much just said that's all superstition. Let's focus on the mere matter for the last 500-600 years. So that's left a whole side of reality that we've kind of not focused on. So we look at things like this interaction, kind of the reality breaking moments, and all we can really say is, I don't know. This is one of those things. It's just one of those things. Like in this case, what's being described here at first has some flavors of undiagnosed mental illness. Like this is a guy who's really into it in a dark way. He's traipsing around with the corpses, which is a big freaking deal in those days. Like this isn't
Yeah.
like this isn't like your average like short-skirted goth chick who likes to hang out in the graveyard to appear edgy. This is like this
No,
is
this is
fucking
smearing yourself with shit in the public square levels of what?
yes. And this guy was violent enough that people were trying regularly to restrain him, but also physically
Nobody
strong enough
could.
that no one or no group of people were successful in doing so, which isn't generally how humans work. Um, so we've got
And
multiple,
the breaking chains and manacles and such too.
yeah, like
Like
that leaves us in a like, and this is all like a multiply witnessed story. This is people knew that this was a guy who did this. They knew that this was a thing. And he always stayed in that area where the unclean spirits might be, to use the parlance of the time. So, what the fuck was up with this guy? We don't know. I heard someone theorize once that there are, just as there are like chemical imbalances and kind of like cerebral deformities and stuff like that make us vulnerable to certain mental illnesses, that there may also be certain configurations that make us vulnerable to metaphysical things as well, which we of course couldn't treat with medicine because we don't have medicine for the metaphysical, which would give us a situation here. And like I like that particular approach, because that gives us a way in which this makes at least a little bit of sense, because then we are presented with a human being who's got some sort of physical or chemical deformity that makes them susceptible to something that we still don't understand. Jesus is then the only person who can respond to that, because Jesus has the ability to see and interact with that side as well as anything else. If we are hunting for an explanation, that is one that I find satisfying, but no definitive explanation is forthcoming in the text. It's demons, shrug, we move on, has pretty much been the traditional approach to that. And as much as I don't like the imperfectness of this, I really don't have anything better to offer. So, yeah, and
You know
like,
me, the eternal skeptic, where I run up against something in the Bible and it's just like, but okay, but I don't know is not
yeah,
a sufficient answer.
right. But the
But
point of this
that's the way faith
isn't,
is sometimes.
and this is the thing, the point of this, and I always remind us that we have to consider the Bible narratively and instructively and not historically. So the point of this is not to provide a kind of post-awakening scientific methodology supported explanation of precisely what's happening. Like, that's setting the stage in terms of storytelling and environment. Like, this sci-fi, this ain't. They're not going to give us the tachyon count. Instead, we have to ask, what purpose does it serve here? And we have like several notes throughout the text of what the point of this is. The demoniac, for lack of a better term, because that's how he's traditionally referred to before identifying the demon and the individual separately, identifies Jesus before Jesus identifies himself in the story, which is at that point hugely indicative, because that tells us that whatever the fuck this thing is, it's connected to something a great deal larger than the average bear.
And it knows who he is immediately.
Yes. And narratively then, what happens here? It identifies Jesus. It identifies himself. It says, I am legion, for we are many. I'm a demon. Look at me demoning up in a demoniac sort of way. And Jesus is like, okay, fuck you, pigs then. This is a recurring theme throughout the earlier days of the text. Anytime something gets up that would interrupt the divine timetable by threatening the messianic secret, gets got. Like, to be clear, it's a demon we're dealing with, so like this is a healing situation. So it's not like Jesus is just shanking a bitch for happening to say his name, which I do think would be out of character for the Lord and Savior. But in this case, you've got a demon who's like, I know you, I know your shit, and I'm about to spill it. And Jesus says, okay, oink oink, motherfucker, and off the cliffs he goes. And then Jesus immediately turns and says, hey, look at all the good stuff God did. That was God, not me. Like, in many ways, I read this almost as a sort of divine sleight of hand. Jesus kind of walks into a metaphysical oh shit moment and says, okay, well,
it's exactly like you said, pay no attention to the man in front of the curtain.
Exactly. And as harsh as it is to say, sometimes in situations like this, the healing aspect is almost incidental. Like, I almost get, and here I'm going to go for the deep cut here, I almost get kind of a Majin Buu sort of vibe here, to go back to the old Dragon Ball. There's this one scene in Dragon Ball Z where big old fat Buu is just kind of wandering around and stumbles across a blind kid. And he keeps trying to scare it, but the kid can't see shit. So he's like, I don't know what you are. Why should I be scared of you? And Boo actually heals the kid. Ha, now I can scare you. And the kid's like, oh yeah, happy I'm healed. Like, the healing was incidental because he was doing a totally different thing. In Boo's case, he was trying to be evil. In Jesus' case, he was trying to be Jesus. But like, it's the same sort of functionality. Like, the healing is almost incidental to the story itself. And yes, I did just compare Jesus to Fat Boo, which I think is one of the best analogies I've pulled so far. And if you don't like that, you can fight me on it.
Someone please draw that. Please.
Fat Boo Jesus. I'm here for that. I mean, technically he was fat because he absorbed the Supreme Kai, which are basically like the Dragon Ball Jesuses, so I guess it works. Anyway, before we get into Dragon Ball lore too much, you can tell I've been spending a lot of time with my kids.
Yeah, we're already in the middle of an impenetrably complex lore. We don't need to bring a second into it.
Right. So, yeah, so that's pretty much what we have happening here, is the healing happens, and, like, Jesus is almost reactive in this passage in a way that that I think is important. He's not as intentional as he often is. And I think that's kind of important because you know, we like to read Jesus as being all knowing in a way that doesn't totally fit the human experience. Uh, and, you know, Jesus being part of God is functionally omnipotent in some respects, but in the incarnate form, he couldn't be because then he wouldn't be incarnate. So, like, without getting into
Yeah, I
too
guess
much of,
part of being human would be being trapped within the like confines of a human brain,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
Oh
So,
God, that means Jesus got distracted and like forgot what he was saying mid-sentence or why he walked into the other room.
yep, all of those things had to have happened to Jesus. You know, to date.
Because that's something that I feel like people miss. That was a major part of the point, right?
Yeah,
For
like
God
that
to
was the
experience
point.
mortality in its fullness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to date back to earlier, like we're talking like second century heresies here, and the arguments against Arius and that whole thing involving Santa Claus slapping a bitch. That whole thing. One of the big,
The Council of Nicaea.
yeah, one of the big kind of arguments leading up to that was the argument that which he has assumed he cannot, you know, remit. Or so if he hasn't assumed it, then he can't forgive it. And that's kind of the like I don't take that kind of a destructive approach to it, but in general, like the whole point was for him to assume the things. So yeah, he would have in the incarnate time he would have surrendered his omnipotence. Now post resurrection slash regeneration, if you prefer the Time Lord approach, popping out of the tomb, he's much more in connect with his divine self. And once he's ascended, he's back to being hologos, which is the third part of the Trinity, and that omnipotence is at full command. But during this period, he would not have had access to that. He would have had to live the way we live in order for this to work. So, him just kind of rocking up to the the Gerasenes hillside, and man comes bolting out of the tombs and says, "Ha ha, am demon." I imagine Jesus was surprised as fuck, like, "Oh shit, holy me!" Like, so yeah, there's that. And what's interesting to me, and I don't have a very good explanation for it, is the interaction between Jesus and Legion, where Legion kind of realizes, oh yeah, you could really put the fuck out of me, and Legion actually asks to be put into the pigs instead because he realizes what's coming. Uh, yeah, so
He could wipe me, couldn't he?
yeah, and it's like I love that about if we're gonna go the full angelic being approach. I love that about when we encounter mischievous and or straight up evil metaphysical things is they're often fairly short sighted. Call a demon in that respect would be obsessed with short term gains. So they wouldn't be long thinking things. They live off of those sort of deals. So it totally makes sense for people to be like, "Ha! It's Jesus! I'm a challenge thing." Oh God! Oh no! I have become error. Like that. That actually makes sense for what we're talking about.
All my base are belong to you.
Exactly. And so that's pretty much where I see that. Now, I think unless you got any other
See, this is a
questions,
shame. I feel that this chapter alone, I feel like we could talk about for a long time because there's like still so much here, and we
yeah,
haven't
well
even
we
moved on to the second story.
do have that second story to get to too, and I think this is a good place to move because I don't think there's any further detail to dig into that right now. Like we've touched on everything, I think.
All right, all right.
All right, so give us our sandwich.
It's a Markwitch. Okay.
Yeah.
A girl restored to life and a woman healed. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and pleaded with him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his cloak, I will be made well." Immediately her flow of blood stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my cloak?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the synagogue leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the synagogue leader, "Do not be afraid, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the synagogue leader's house, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. That's such a badass story.
It
I love
is.
Jesus' swagger in some of these stories. I'm sorry, that has swagger. It's like, don't tell anyone
And
about this.
I have
You'll
to
get her
remind
some
you
food.
again. I have to remind you again, by the way, that in terms of the presentation of Jesus, Mark is the oldest recorded gospel and therefore is probably the most accurate.
Yeah.
So, badass Jesus
That's
with
got
some
so much
swagger.
swagger.
Yeah, that's probably the most accurate take on it. Now, I mentioned earlier this is
It's
what's called
amazing.
a Markan sandwich. It's a common storytelling technique that Mark uses on several occasions where he'll start one story and then interrupt it with another and then conclude the first story at the end of it. So that is literally a common technique that Mark likes to use on particularly important stories that interconnect with each other. Now, that leaves us room to the argument, and Dr. Black's commentary, which is the one I'm using, makes note of this as a
Still here,
possibility.
just continue.
Yeah, makes note of the fact that the two stories might not have happened simultaneously, so they might be two different stories that were just kind of crammed together. I I tend not to think that in this case because of how well they fit together. These two stories feel like they belong together because we're dealing not only with like just healing stories in general, which, when we were taught that in Sunday school, where it's like, oh, it's a healing story. Yay, he heals this and he heals this and yay, healing happens. Oh, yay, let's not talk about the menstrual blood, but yay, it happened. And that's kind of how we approach it in Sunday school. But the truth is, these two connect super, super, super well. And at the center of them is Jesus is busy as fuck and gets distracted. Like, that's really what's at the center of this as a combined story. Because, like, if you
Jesus
assume...
has shit he's trying to keep secret.
Well, not just that he has shit that he's trying to keep secret. Like, he crosses again in the boat. He gets to the other side. There's a huge crowd. They're all over him. One of the leaders is in the crowd going, Jesus, Jesus, help my daughter, help my daughter. And the crowd just keeps moving along. And Jairus goes along with them. There's no mention that Jesus even necessarily heard Jairus when that was said. It's just, so he went with them. At which point we flash forward to the bleeding woman in the crowd. All of that happens. There's no new, I hate to break it to you, there's no new narrative information I can shine on you. We've all heard this story before. It's a woman with some terrible...
It seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, terrible, horrible
Just miracles
PCOS
be
gone
happening.
mad. And, I think what I want to call to attention here, though, is in this story, who fucks up? Answer: every single person with a penis. Who takes agency in this story and connects to God through faith and attains healing? People without them. Who does Jesus focus on throughout the story? Jesus' attentions are constantly being pulled by the crowd, constantly being pulled, but the minute that woman touches him, I noticed that. Right here, we have a good example of Jesus completely dismissing the toxicity of cultural male attention and centering here. Jesus stops every freaking dick-led moron who's dragging him through the streets the minute a woman who actually needs him shows up. He doesn't ignore,
I mean, is there evidence to say that the whole crowd was men?
You're dealing with leaders of the temple predominantly surrounding him at that point, according to the beginning of the text, which, style of the time, not a lot of women in that group. Bit of a sausage party. Not gonna lie. So, yeah, there are obviously women in the crowd, otherwise the woman wouldn't be there. But the predominant demands on Jesus' attention as he's surrounded by temple leaders is going to be from dudes. And the apostles, who are dudes. And the dudes that are with them trying to talk about how the other dudes are doing doodly stuff in a doodly way. It's, yeah, like that's the...
I mean, not to take away from, like, the hot feminist take or whatever, but honestly, and I'm not the theologian, but what I took away from it was more a matter of, like, it doesn't matter if there's... Dude, don't do that on camera. It doesn't matter if there's, like, a bunch of important people around. Jesus stops and cares about just this random woman with a lot of faith. This person
I agree.
with a lot of faith.
I agree. And this is one of those environments where it's also worth noting that importance within that context was following a dictate of gender. So put any other temple leader in Jesus's position, and he would have been expected to pay attention to these people specifically. These are the people you have to listen to. These are the people you have to follow. And so Jesus is planted right in the middle of all of that. And if some woman touched the hem of your garment, shake it and move on. Like that's the cultural expectation for a popular male rabbi.
I'd gotten the
place.
impression that I had always been given the impression that this was just like a brush of fabric, not the sort of thing you would even notice in the press of a crowd.
Right. Like, which is why Jesus stopping to take note of it is...
The passage says that he feels
yeah, you're
the
right.
power channel through him.
And so that kind of encounter...
But not that he feels the actual contact, so...
Right. That kind of encounter would be for anybody but Jesus so insignificant as to pass without note. That's kind of the point. But it's not beyond noteworthy to Jesus. Like, and that really is the point there. And I like to take that in a feminist direction because, one, we don't do that enough with the text anyway, so fuck you, we're going to do that. But two, because I think
there's plenty of spots for it. I just don't see it here, but let's continue.
No, this is, like, I got the feminist take with this one directly from the author of that commentary in my New Testament class some years ago, so I take it as a valid take.
Damn.
So, like, that
like
ain't...
I said, I'm not a theologian.
Yeah, that ain't just me spitballing. But that said, you know, it's not explicitly feminist. He's not saying, haha, because you are a woman, I will honor you. Like, no, that's not what's happening here. But it is indicative of Jesus's priorities as countercultural, because at the time, dismissing some random beggar woman on the street side would have been so obvious as to be not even worth mentioning. Of course, you wouldn't pay her any mind. And Jesus
she was expecting for him to not pay her any mind.
Right.
She just, like, basically touched to his hem and get out of Dodge, you know?
Yeah, that was her plan. Is she's like, look, I'm a woman, a bleeding woman, an unclean woman at that. I have so many intersectionalities that, like, the cops would kill me if I got anywhere near this guy. So I'm going to take my risk, and I'm going to yank on his clothes, and I'm going to roll back out of town, and ain't nobody going to catch it. And that's the closest I can get to this. Like, I am fighting for my life. This is my best chance. This is my only chance. There's no way I can talk to the guy. There's no way I can ask the guy for healing because, again, bleeding woman. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to get a little yank, and then I'm going to roll out the way. And Jesus fucking stops everything because, like, no, this is important. Fuck all y'all and your temple politics. This is what's important.
The little people are important, not
Yes.
the big wigs.
Precisely. And of course, this happening in the middle of the incident with Jairus's daughter, like there's a whole political level to that, because Jairus is one of the aforesaid high priests. And when we talk about the role of the little people here, like Jairus is one of the bigwigs here. And so Jesus kind of initially ignores him, which we can assume is part of his generally ignoring all of the bigwigs. Like, pay them no mind. Like, fuck you, Musk, fuck you, Bezos. Don't know who you are, but you're with them, so fuck you too. Kind of move on. And so Jesus doesn't at first pay him any mind. And by the time they get past the incident with the woman and him focusing on that, we know Jesus is aimed at the little people. Jairus, his buddy's like, hey, word's come back that your daughter's dead, man. Don't bother him anymore. Like, you're not going to get anything out of this. Like, we're past the point of help. And that's when Jesus turns. Not when it's Jairus asking, not when it's the temple leadership asking, but when it's, oh, there's a child involved. There's a little person, someone who doesn't have anything to do with this politics. Then he's laser focused on it. Mm-hmm. To which point they're like, well, she's dead. And he's like, fuck you, I'm Jesus. And the story, proceeds apace.
No, she's just sleeping. No, really, she's... Just get everybody out of here for a minute.
Now, there's another aspect to that, too, by the way.
Don't tell anyone.
There's another aspect to that, too, by the way, because we think about the idea of resurrection as a very beautiful thing in the modern age, because we are 2 centuries on from Jesus worshiping. Remember, we just talked about in the past discussion here about how corpses and the dead and things like that were considered extremely unclean, like massively, like smearing shit all over yourself unclean. To have been in contact with the dead is one of the worst things you can have done. To have been one of the dead and still be walking up and around was so disgusting as to be incomprehensible. So, which is actually why some of the early Christian persecutions happened, because we start talking about the resurrected Jesus and like, oh my Lord, that's disgusting. Why would you worship that? Like,
why are you worshiping a zombie?
Exactly. Like, it's a little less Passion of the Christ and a little more Thriller without the catchy music. Like, so Day of the Dead type shit. And now we've got this little girl and they're like, she's dead. She's sleeping. But no, she's sleeping. She catching Z's, motherfucker. I'm going to go wake her up.
Get everybody out of here while we take care of her and make her feel better.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. She's having a nap. Shut up. And so once that's done, he further cements that.
He's only sleeping.
Yeah. Once it's all done, he further cements it.
This girl has ceased to be.
Yeah. So once that's all done, he further cements this by saying, don't tell anybody I was here. Don't tell anybody I was involved. Don't tell anybody this happened. She was taking a motherfucking nap. Not just for me, because, keeping my secret, messianic secret, all that. Also for her. You tell people she used to be dead, people are going to start thinking she's a problem. Jill is correct. She's sleeping. And that's it. Like, that's really why it goes. So Jesus has all of this badassery, but it works on multiple levels, because the way he rolls in and says, no, she's asleep. Shut up. Like, he is strutting his shit from day one throughout this one, and he is laser focused on the people who need it most. So that's pretty much it for that. And this is like, you ask me... If you ask me, why do you love Jesus? You ask me, why do you love Jesus? This passage here is a good example of that. No, sorry. Go ahead. You were trying to say something.
No, I forgot. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it must have been a heck of a thing to try and balance, like, trying to keep your divinity secret while also doing as many miracles for just little people on the fringes as you can get away with in the time that you have.
That's the great challenge there, and this is why the messianic
getting
secret
lynched
is...
by the state, speed run.
Yeah, which he could have did. Like, I mean, this is a guy who could have
speed ran it a lot faster. Like, yeah, go ahead, tell everybody.
He could have got his ass.
That's why the life of Jesus is just as important. I feel like people hyperfixate on his crucifixion, and
Hmm.
like obviously that's important, but I think he was here for more than just to die. Like,
Right. The death was the exclamation point on a long sentence of grace and mercy. Like that, an exclamation point by itself is meaningless, but it ends something, and that's what that crucifixion was. And the resurrection is that next sentence that we all need to hear. Anyway, that's me sermonizing. Any other questions we want to tear into? Chat, you guys have been weirdly quiet. You guys got any follow up questions you want to chuck our way?
let me check and see if anybody in the Discord
Oh,
is asking about anything.
I got the chat open
I
next to me. If
see.
anybody wants to pop on with that.
No, I'm not seeing anything. And you know what? It is 10:30, so we need to be wrapping up anyway. Did we really fit this big, dense chapter of Mark into an hour?
No, we fit it into about 40 minutes because we had a 20-minute tech interruption.
We're get
See, if you
streaming is
hold
going
us
to be
to a
good for our
schedule,
recording times.
yeah, if you hold us to a schedule, we can actually do it. All right.
Don't get
So,
people expecting things of me, man.
well, we got Mark's. We
I'm
got
here
Mark
for the
6.
love.
We got Mark 6 coming up next month. Next 2 weeks from now, when we do our next stream, we're going to be back into the Exodus basics. See if we keep to our schedule then, because we usually have a lot to rant about in the older texts. So
Yeah.
we'll see how we do with that. But in the meantime, the first off, thank you all for sticking with for the stream. Thank you, chat. It was wonderful to see you. General announcements before we get rolling. We've got a lot of stuff going on. If you are following along online, I see there's a fair few folk hanging out in there. And you aren't a member of our Discord server, be a member of our Discord server. That's our church. That's where people are doing stuff. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a member of the church to participate. That's our sanctuary
You don't even
building.
have to really be interested in becoming a Christian. Just if you'd
Yeah.
like to have fellowship with, like-minded people who just happen to, worship this cool, long-haired, dark-skinned hippie.
Yeah.
Like, come on. We'll talk about stuff.
Exactly.
We have a shit posting channel. Seriously, this is.
Yeah, how many churches you know that got a holy shit posting
youth
channel?
pastor. This isn't what you think of when you think of church.
Yeah, no.
Might as well hand me an acoustic guitar at this point. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, first off, join us on the Discord server. But also, like, we got stuff coming up. We've got these streams that are happening every other week around about this time. And on the weeks we're not doing this, we have Bible study on the Discord server. We mentioned earlier that we're working through the book of Job. I don't remember if we mentioned that before the first stream cut off or after the new one started, but we're working on Job. And come join us for our Joby conversations. They're fun. We are now also at a point where we are having some kind of worship service every week. We have finally gotten big enough to attempt to do that. We have English worship services on the first and third Sundays of every month. Those are at 10:30 a.m. Japan Standard Time, which equates to about 8:30 p.m. on Saturday nights for you folks on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And so if you want to join us for a nice little Saturday evening service to catch up with our mornings, wonderful time to do it. First and third Sundays are English. Second and fourth are Japanese with our partner congregation, Ashia Christian Church. Now, if you happen to be in the area, or if you just really happen to feel like pulling a late night, or if you're in a time zone where it isn't, on those same Sundays at 1 p.m. Japan time, which is 11 p.m. Eastern time, we're also doing kind of informal hangouts in the opposite language of the day's service. So if we had an English service on the first Sunday, we'll have an informal hangout in Japanese at 1 o'clock that same day. Then flip-flop it for the next week. We got a Japanese service at 10:30 and then an informal hangout at 1 in English. So keep an eye out for that. We've got our mailing list. We've got our website. All that other shit's down in the description. I will throw this out here as well, by the way. 'Tis the season of Christmas. And there are 3 points I would like to bring up. First off, Christmas Eve is going to be a wild one here at the church. We are going to be having our Christmas campfire event where we're going to crack up the bonfire in the yard. We're going to toast s'mores. I am given to believe that someone who may in the end wind up being me is going to be making a big old pot of soup. And we're just going to hang out and we're going to sing songs and we're going to just take it easy. That starts about 5 here because our church physical is in Japan. So if you're coming for that, that's the time. 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve, we're going to be having a campfire. 7 o'clock is when we're going to roll indoors for the worship service, which will be live streamed for those of you in the rest of the world. I'll admit that a 7 p.m. is going to be a 5 a.m. stream for all you all. So if our Christmas Eve sunset service feels like a sunrise service for you, by all means. Otherwise, the joys of live stream is that it comes up later. So you can go ahead and catch that whenever you need to. On Christmas Day, if you're in town, by the way, too, we are going to have what's looking to be fairly well attended, by the way, a massive potluck event here at the church, too. We're going to be just kind of all hanging out at the church on Christmas Day. We're going to be throwing on the movies on the projectors. We're going to have the heaters running. We're going to be cooking all kinds of food and basically just having a great old time because most of us out here don't have families nearby, and those of us who do are from a culture that doesn't really do Christmas. So we're going to just do the family stuff all together. So if you are in town, come join us for that, please. And of course, that third point that you were wondering if I was ever going to get to, since it is the Christmas season, if you feel like giving Christmas presents, God almighty, could our church use some help? That's the funniest way I can think to put it, but the truth is we do always say that our programming and all the work that we're doing is supported by viewers like you. So if you have the gift of financial ability and or stability,
It's
and
true
feel
though.
like it is, it really is. Not to
If you
mention,
can, please don't ever feel like if you're really going to be a member of the church, you got to give money. Like, no,
no,
we don't do that here.
yeah, we don't do that.
Do that here.
We do not do that here. So there's no charge for membership. You don't have to pay to play. We don't even ask
But
our
if
members
if the spirit moves you and you've got the change, like we could use a hand.
And we talked about this. We talked about this a little in worship this past week.
We also could use a video editor.
Well, we talked about this in worship a little bit this last week as well. Giving is an important part of the Christian life because we all used to be communists. You know, we used to share everything. We can't really do that under capitalism now. But we do share what we have. But not everybody has the same stuff. Maybe you're able to give by volunteering some time as a video editor. Maybe you're able to give by hanging out and talking in the chat. Maybe you're able to give by getting on a podcast or a video with me and then spending the next 3 or 4 years of your life ranting about the Bible. I know somebody who did that and does it quite well. So there's a lot of ways.
What I'm good at.
Yeah, no, God gives us each our gifts, and you know, if finances are your thing, the links down below.
Each of us gifts according to our kind, and I was made to bitch.
You know, but it works. But yeah, if financial stuff's your thing, the link's down in the description. It really does help. Other than that, there's only one last thing I would ever deign to ask of you, and in fact, I'm not going to. I'm going to make Courtney do it.
Like, share, and subscribe, please.
Yeah, like I'm not even joking that putting this
Leave a comment below.
Yes.
Tell a friend in person. Like, write it down on a freaking piece of paper and stick it to the church bulletin board or
fist fight the algorithm for us. Well, that's really what it is. Like, we get more visibility, the church grows. We get the message out a little bit better. So you want to slap this on your Facebook or drop an Instagram link or whatever it is that you youngins do with your ticks and your talks and what have you, because I'm old. You know,
or drop a question in the comments and maybe we'll start answering them at the end of the next episode. Who knows?
Oh yeah. To be perfectly honest, like if you drop a question after an episode's aired in the comments, I see every question that's actually every comment that's made on these videos. All I think like 5 of them that have ever been made. You know, drop a comment.
Please don't abuse the fact that Don moderates the channel himself.
Yeah, I see it immediately. You drop a comment, it shows up right here on my phone. That's where it goes. So do that. I will respond there. I promise. I can't guarantee you'll like it, but I will do so. That
we need
all
a mod
said,
team too, if anyone's interested.
We're working on it. That all said, y'all have yourselves a wonderful week, and we're thinking about you. We're praying with you. God's with you too. Have a wonderful Advent season, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.